Welcome to Clued in Mystery. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brooke, and we both love mystery.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Sarah. Today we're going to get back into talking about Agatha Christie's Sleuths.
Before we do that, should we mention our ride-along that is coming up?
Yes.
So members of the Clued In Cartel, which is our paid membership, and to join the cartel, it's very accessible. It ranges from $12 US a year to $120, and you decide what your discount is. Members of the cartel will be able to see the product of what you and I write over the next little bit and provide some input in terms of what we should be writing as we try something completely new and a little bit scary.
It is a little scary, but it's really exciting. So bit by bit, as we write the story, cartel members will get to see it as we go along. And like you said, give some input when we want certain details, or maybe when we get stuck and we need an idea.
So we hope to see people there. We want to have a lot of fun.
So in past episodes about Agatha Christie sleuths, we've talked about some of the lesser known sleuths that maybe only appeared in a few books or short stories. But today we're turning our attention to one of the most popular, Miss Marple. Agatha Christie's sleuth, the incomparable Miss Jane Marple, first appeared in a short story published in 1927 called The Tuesday Night Club, which later became the first chapter of The 13 Problems. Marple's first appearance in a full-length novel was in 1930 with The Murder at the Vicarage. Her last appearance was in Sleeping Murder, published in 1976 after Christie's death. Altogether, this octogenarian sleuth was in 12 novels and 20 short stories. Best known as simply Miss Marple, she's the quintessential elderly busybody, listening and picking up on details that others miss in order to cunningly solve mysteries. She likely acquired her surname from the name of a railway station in Marple on the Manchester to Sheffield Hope Valley line. The story goes that Agatha Christie spent a long delay there and made note of the sign. Miss Marple resides in the fictional English village of St. Mary Mead, where there's a pub, a few shops, the vicarage, and Gossington Hall estate. According to the Agatha Christie website, the character of Miss Marple was heavily influenced by Christie's own grandmother and her grandmother's friends. Like many older women of that time, Marple's hobbies include knitting, gardening, and gossiping, of course. She's described as an attractive, tall, and thin old woman with a twinkle in her blue eyes. It's interesting to note that Miss Marple's personality changed some over the years. In The Murder at the Vicarage, she's only barely tolerated by some of the townspeople. She's considered a snoop and sort of a bother who always expects the worst in other people. In later stories, this isn't the case. Miss Marple seems kinder and less negative in her views. Something that remains constant in her character, however, is her willingness to remain somewhat overlooked and disregarded, the quiet old woman in the corner who's secretly figuring everyone out. Miss Marple had a succession of housemaids in the stories. After her favorite longtime maid, Florence, retires, she employs several young women from a local orphanage whom she trains for service. And then in her later years, she employs a companion named Sherry Baker, and she's first introduced in The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. Most of the Marple stories are set in St. Mary Mead, but not all of them. We find the sleuth to be very independent and a good traveler who enjoys visiting friends in various UK locations as well as farther afield. Wherever she goes, a mysterious death is sure to take place. Miss Marple is described as a spinster, but it's mentioned that she did have a special beau in her youth. But without children or immediate family of her own, her closest known relative is her nephew, Raymond West. He's an author and very fond of his aunt, but he tends to overestimate his own capabilities and underestimate his aunt's capacity to read human nature and therefore solve mysteries. Although Miss Marple is always portrayed as an elderly woman, her exact age is a bit of a puzzle itself. In At Bertram's Hotel, published in 1965, it said she first visited this hotel when she was 14, and about 60 years have passed since then, so implying that she's around 75. But in 450 from Paddington, published almost 10 years before, Miss Marple reports to other characters that she will be turning 90 the following year. I doubt that the Queen of Crime made a mistake here. Maybe in her mind, these stories were written out of order. Or was Miss Marple poking fun at her feebleness on purpose when she said she was about to be 90? It seems like something the character might do to downplay her abilities and keep her crime solving on the down low. The Murder at the Vicarage and A Murder is Announced were both adapted for the stage and played for many years, last touring in the late 1970s. The BBC's beloved TV series entitled Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, starring Joan Hickson, aired from 1984 to 1992, and all 12 Marple novels were dramatized in this production. As we've learned in previous Clued-In episodes, Agatha Christie was never very happy with film productions of her work, but it seems that after the BBC's success in producing The Secret Adversary and subsequently Partners in Crime, they were granted the rights to produce the Miss Marple stories. Other TV adaptations followed, but ardent fans seem to prefer the Joan Hickson Miss Marple, similarly to the preference for David Suchet as Poirot. Fans also enjoyed this particular series because it sticks so closely to the original plot lines of the Marple books. Murder, She Said was a 1961 full-length mystery film based on 450 from Paddington, and it starred Margaret Rutherford as Miss Marple. MGM also made 3 sequels, including Rutherford as Marple. It does not stick closely to the plot, and Rutherford plays a comedic and rather silly Miss Marple who often breaks the fourth wall by talking directly to the audience. In 1980, Angela Lansbury played Miss Marple in The Mirror Cracked, and the film featured an all-star cast, including Edward Fox as Inspector Craddock, and he does most of the legwork for Miss Marple in this film. Lansbury then, of course, later played a similar role as Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote. It seems to me that the multiple TV series, and especially the long-running BBC series, has sort of tricked us a little bit in thinking that Agatha Christie wrote more Miss Marple than she did. But even though Miss Marple starred in less than 25% of Agatha Christie's novels, she definitely accounts for much more than that in the heart of mystery readers.
Well, thank you, Brooke. And I have to agree. I'm surprised at your number there that she was in less than 25% of what Agatha Christie wrote, because I would have thought it was more. But I guess a lot of short stories, you can expand those into, screen adaptations.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that's what happened. And we've talked before too, Sarah, that sometimes the other sleuths, the lesser known sleuths that we discussed, Sergeant Battle, even Tommy and Tuppence, some of their stories when they appeared on TV, the sleuth in them then became Miss Marple. So she got some other storylines from some of the other sleuths as well. But of the 66 novels that Agatha Christie wrote, to think that only 12 of them were Marple novels, like that kind of blew my mind, because she is such a big part of the canon.
I don't think you mentioned it, but the kind of more recent BBC series, Agatha Christie's Marple, with, and I think there were 2 women who played Miss Marple, Geraldine McEwen for the first set of the stories, and then Julia Mackenzie in kind of the last half of the episodes for that. I really like those. I think they stray a little bit from the stories, but what I like about those is in the setup, in the opening scenes, she's always reading something, and if you are quick enough to like make a note of whatever it is she's reading, it's often another Golden Age author, or it's some callback to mysteries in a historical sense.
Oh, that's very clever. I like that. I think that the TV adaptations also skewed my understanding of the character a little bit because, like, especially the actresses that you just named, um, they're not they're not disliked in the community. They're kind of the sweet elderly lady. They're usually, quite attractive and a really liked part of the community, I think, versus who we see in when I first read The Murder at the Vicarage. I was like, oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
these characters really don't like her and they don't want her around.
Yeah.
But, as I explained, that did change over the series. And I was wondering about that. And I'm wondering if part of that changed as Agatha Christie aged herself, because, in 1927, she was a very young woman. And, elderly women, we think of them differently when we're in our, 20s and 30s, when boy, 70 doesn't seem very old at all right now as I'm entering middle age. And, you don't want to portray those older people as like stodgy or, an annoying busybody. I'm wondering if that changed in the way she saw herself as she became an older woman.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Brooke. I think that's a great observation. And I I get this sense that Agatha Christie really enjoyed writing Miss Marple. Although I agree with you, when I first read Murder at the Vicarage, I thought she was not very kind to Miss Marple at all.
Mm-mm.
Um, and I haven't read all of the Marple stories or novels, so I can't, you know, really talk to how that change evolves. But I'm glad to hear that it does.
Yes, yes, I am too.
Um, for today's conversation, I started reading the 13 Problems, and so that's the short stories that she first appeared in, and I really like them. They're short, snappy, and in each of them, a different character is kind of sharing a mysterious story that they're familiar with, and there's six of them, I think, who've gathered, and they each kind of pose a solution. And then it's Miss Marple who, at the end, has some observation of some seemingly pointless piece of information that actually, reveals the truth of the matter. But yeah, I've really been enjoying those.
Oh, those sound fantastic. I'll definitely pick that up too. And I think that's so because we're talking about how she changed over the length of the stories, but here she is the very first time that Christie presents her, and she already has that characterization where, because that stays true, doesn't it? Where at the end of the story, Miss Marple is able to be the one to identify that one piece of information that unlocks, or maybe not just one, but key pieces of information that unlock the whole mystery. And that obviously was established right at the beginning. And one thing that I learned and thought that was really interesting in my research was that to think about the fact that these days it's very common to have a sleuth put the mystery together by listening and talking, um, or simply observing different people and how they interact with one another. But that was very new for Marple, because prior to that, sleuths either had a police background or an espionage, they were into espionage or military or something, and they were looking at physical evidence, fingerprints, a dropped letter or a note left behind. So these very physical things that would tie the case together. And she was kind of the first one to just observe, maybe secret alliances or human nature. So that was a very new thing that Agatha Christie was introducing.
I think it's interesting, and you kind of commented on this, the way that she doesn't really age, or we don't really know how old she is. You said there's a couple of hints, and yeah, maybe the stories were written out of chronological order, or as you say, maybe Agatha Christie was just kind of messing with the audience. But and I guess she's like Poirot in that sense, in that she doesn't really age, even though the world around her is presumably is changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't it interesting that Christie did that with both of her primary sleuths? She doesn't do that with everyone. Tommy and Tuppence age, and they sort of mirror her life cycle. But yeah, I think that it's interesting that she kept these kind of um, solid or stable characters there. And I think that sometimes she gets criticized for that because there's no character arc or whatever. But I think it was very intentional, and it really creates a strong story and an ability to create a series around that character.
Well, and it also makes the character really timeless,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're not so ground in whatever is going on in the outside world. You can pick up the Tuesday Night Club, and it could be any time, right? It's six people who've gathered to have this conversation. It's not grounded in a particular event, or there's no reference to um, COVID or cell phones, or I mean, obviously those aren't going to appear in Agatha Christie stories, but it's really timeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a good lesson, right? Because as you say, if you were writing something now and you put all these details in that are about, the 2020s, then it's going to freeze it in that time period where we can still enjoy these Miss Marple stories that are, 100 years old now, that feel like they're just not locked into an era. Yeah, great point.
So I know it was a couple of years ago now that the Christie Estate commissioned, I think it was 12 authors to write 12 new Miss Marple stories. I would love for them to do that again. Like I would love to read more Miss Marple stories.
I would too.
Well, hopefully someone from the Christie Estate is listening.
We can only hope. There have been some discussions about feminism and Miss Marple. And interestingly, which I guess this is like anything these days, kind of both sides of this, say that she's very good representation of feminism, and then the opposite. And I think I'm on the end where I feel like she is a great representation of like feminism and being a strong woman. She's independently wealthy. We don't really know. She never works. She just has the means to exist, right? So she's very independent in that way. She's unmarried. She's always been unmarried. She's taking care of herself. She travels alone. She does have companions, of course, but as far as like getting around the world, she does what she likes. She solves crimes, and I think she's a wonderful role model for women.
I agree. And older women as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
She really plays up well, I'm just this helpless old woman that, nobody sees. That's part of the Tuesday Night Club, is she says, and nobody sees me sitting in the corner, right? But I agree. I think she's a really good example of how a woman can be independent even into her old age. And I think she sets the stage for some of what we're seeing now, where there's, you know, multiple series with older sleuths. Um, and, there's definitely a line I think you can draw from Miss Marple through to those series that we're seeing today.
Exactly. And in this contemporary time, we are still drawn to that idea of the person who you least expect can be, the hero.
Yeah, exactly. Although Miss Marple, the name, is a bit of a shorthand for kind of a busybody, know-it-all. You know, you'll hear reference to in a detective show. If there is an old lady character, they're often referred to as a Miss Marple, and not in a particularly positive way.
This is true. Mm-hmm.
So, Brooke, was the character of Miss Marple inspired by anyone?
Oh, yes. Actually, Sarah, we see her predecessor in some books by Anna Catherine Green, and the character is Amelia Butterworth. And Amelia is a helper to Anna Catherine Green's primary sleuth, Detective Ebenezer Gryce. And this enables him to kind of utilize her to get into the, drawing rooms of some of the more posh society where they wouldn't necessarily let a police detective who was kind of considered a lower, blue collar worker into that world. And Amelia was able to infiltrate it, much like we see Miss Marple doing the same thing.
Oh, that's a fantastic connection. And I think Agatha Christie, in her biography, identified Anna Catherine Green as one of her inspirations in writing Mysterious Affair at Styles.
Oh, that's true. And not to get off on a Anna Catherine Green tangent, but she was just so ahead of her time in so many ways. And so it's interesting that we see her bringing in this elderly female sleuth much earlier than even Miss Marple.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brooke, this has been so much fun speaking about Miss Marple. And I actually hope this isn't the last time that we talk about her because she is such a great character.
I think I would love to revisit Miss Marple. And, we might want to do a viewing of those silly movies starring Margaret Rutherford and discuss how they differ from the actual Christie canon. It could be a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today on Clued in Mystery. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Sarah. And we both love mystery. Clued in Mystery is written and produced by Brooke Peterson and Sarah M. Stephen. Music is by Shane Ivers. If you liked what you heard, please consider telling a friend, leaving a review, or subscribing with your favorite podcast listening app. Visit our website at cluedinmystery.com to sign up for our newsletter, The Clued In Chronicle, or to join our paid membership, The Clued In Cartel. We're on social media at Clued In Mystery.